Okay, this chi-square test is going to be looking at the vehicle type versus the cell phone use. And if you remember, we collected data like this at the beginning of the year. This is a sample set of data from that collection. So again, starting off with the expected table, you can use your calculator to do this. If you type in the observed frequency table into your calculator, run your chi-square test, you can then go back and into the matrix menu, go to edit, and matrix B is where my observed values were. So these are all the observed values from this chi-square test. So your calculator can do that for you. You can go back and watch a previous video to help you remember how to do that if you don't remember. That is an option if you're just filling in a table really quick. So expected values, we have those. Let's go ahead and get the chi-square test set up. Step one is the null and alternative hypothesis. So vehicle type. So vehicle type and cell phone use are independent. Again, the null hypothesis is always saying those two things are independent. The alternative to that is vehicle type. So notice it's the exact same thing pretty much. Vehicle type and cell phone use are not independent. Okay. So step two is degree of freedom. So we have so degrees of freedom, remember the little formula is rows minus 1 times the column minus 1. So number of rows is 3. So we have 3 minus 1 times 2 columns minus 1, which ends up giving us 2 times 1, which is just 2. 2 degrees of freedom. Step 3 is stating the significance level. We're going to use a 5% significance level, as is the standard. So 5% significance level, which means if I go and look at my chart from your note sheet, if we have 2 degrees of freedom and we're using a 5% significance level, 5.99 is our critical value, which means my rejection inequality for step 4. We reject the null hypothesis if our calculation, so chi-squared calc, is greater than 5.99. Okay. Step 5 is the actual calculation. So if you notice on this screen here, I've already run my chi-squared test. If you use your calculator to find the expected values, then you've already run your chi-squared test. So I would write those things down right away. I can verify that there are 2 degrees of freedom. And again, my chi-squared value and p-value are both right there. So my chi-squared value to 3 sig figs is 0.671. My p-value is 0.715 to 3 sig figs. So using both of those things, let's go back to our previous screen here. So our chi-squared calculation is, what did I just say it was? Oops. Is 0.671. Our p-value is approximately 0.751. Oops, 715 rather. So in step 6, we need to make our conclusion and verify that with the p-value. We need to make sure we can verify or come to the conclusion using the calculation or the p-value. So let's start with the calculation. So comparing it to our critical value of 5.99. So 0.671 is less than 5.99. This means we fail to reject the null hypothesis, right? Remember, our statement is we reject the null hypothesis if that calculation is greater than the critical value. In this case, it is way less, so we fail to reject. The p-value, it's kind of flipped, right? So we reject the null hypothesis if our calculation is greater than the critical, or we reject if the p-value is greater than the significance level. Well, in this case, the p-value 0.715 from our screen there, right? 0.715 is greater than. So that should be the flipped of this statement right here. So 0.715 is greater than our significance level of 5%. So this verifies that we also failed to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so these two statements verify the same conclusion, that we failed to reject, which means in this case that based on our two variables, vehicle type and cell phone use are independent. Okay, so we fail to reject the null hypothesis. That means basically, again, we're accepting the null hypothesis, which is what this statement is right here.